Hello, everyone. We have an incredible guest. I feel so privileged today, Brad, to have you on the podcast.
Thank
Brad
you,
calls
Vicky.
himself a business engineer. He's being very humble because he's written, well, now multiple books in the process of. He has led his own companies. He has one now where he's helping businesses scale. And he's created many frameworks to help everyone from small family businesses to now focused on medium-sized companies and helping their leadership. Welcome, Brad. It's so great to see you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much.
I wanted to talk more a little bit about how you got started in your career. I know earlier you were kind of leading family businesses. You have a lot of experiences advising family businesses, and you've actually wrote a book and built frameworks around it. So tell me just some anecdotes of people you've met in your journey and what can we all learn from that?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is really fun. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I love what you do. So this
Thank
is a
you.
real pleasure for me. Um, I'll just give you a thumbnail sketch of my career. I started my first company uh, the same month we were married, in 1983 in August, so a long time ago, 42 years ago. And I grew up in a family business. My grandfather started a car dealership back in 1925, and he ended up owning multiple businesses. We grew up, my wife and I, in North Dakota, and I wanted to grow up and be like him. So when I graduated from college and we got married, I started my first company. And that led to 20 years of entrepreneurship, just hardcore. Founded a bunch of companies, some of them Silicon Valley technology businesses. We sold some of them, we had an enterprise software company that we started in 1990 that we sold to Reuters in 1997. And then I started one of the first dot coms and we sold that one in 2001. And in the spring of 2001, which was, as people may recall, a very difficult time for the dot com. So we kind of had that dot com implosion. I was a bit of a victim of that too, but we did sell the business. One of my investors approached me and took me out for breakfast that morning in March of 2001. He told me, he said, I have a family office. Have you ever heard of a family office, Vicky? Do you know what that is?
Yes, absolutely. I have. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll define that for
Sure. For
viewers
the
and
rest of the
listeners.
audience. Yes.
So when families are very fortunate and they've accumulated a lot of wealth, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, let's say, it makes sense for them to start a company of their own to manage their financial affairs instead of going to a bank like most of us mortals would do. And that's called a family office. So there's about 4,000 organizations in the United States. And this gentleman, my investor, he'd been on my board across both of our last companies, the Reuters company and the one that we sold, the dot com, which was called tailwind.com. It was an online resource center for entrepreneurs and small business owners. But he 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 had been on my board for 10 years, and he approached me and said, I have this thing called a family office and I would like to strengthen the management of that. And also he had a hedge fund and he said, I wanted to bring in some other families into that. And so he said, why don't you become my business partner and I'll run the investments and you run the business. And that's what we did. And the reason I mention that is because it moved me into the second area of my career, which was running family business or family offices and working with these multi-generational families. I mentioned to you earlier, fifth, sixth, seventh generation families. And I gradually evolved to running family offices for much larger families and had a wonderful time for about 15 years and then brought it back and raised a little investment fund. And we bought a company in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is where we moved from California 10 years ago, and ran that company for a while. And then took the chocolate of my entrepreneurship and the peanut butter of my family whisperer work and created a Reese cup around family business and frameworks like you mentioned and ways for helping families build and strengthen and perpetuate their family businesses. And happy to talk about that as much as you want. And one area of that that hit in particular was scalability. And how do you build balanced structure into your business so you don't have to work so hard, so you don't have to be so stressed out and exhausted all the time and at risk. And gradually our work evolved into helping first families, but then after that, just companies that are mid-sized businesses, help them build the proper structure and transform from being little caterpillars that can only crawl to butterflies that can fly. That's what we do. We do what's called structural scalability work.
You make it sound so easy, but I know a lot goes into it. Can you give us some examples of frameworks you had to build just based on what works and what doesn't?
Well, the first thing I would mention is a concept, and you mentioned a book. I'm actually writing the book about this right now. It's called The Second Leap. Take the second leap. So when someone starts a company or joins a company, they take the first leap. Okay. So when my grandfather started his company in 2025, he, probably he had to quit his job. I don't know if they had second mortgages back then, but maybe he had to mortgage his house. And they did not have credit cards, but in today's world, you'd be loading up your credit cards, you're taking all sorts of risk. And putting your reputation on the line. I compare it to jumping off a cliff in the dark at night. And that's a very difficult and brave thing to do. They start their company and it's usually built around them. It's structured as a boutique business that is really designed. They hire people to help them, but they're making all the decisions. They're what they call, running the company, so to speak. But as a company grows, becomes 5, 10, 20, $50 million in revenue, they outgrow that structure. It becomes like having a pair of shoes that are 3 sizes too small. And you have to make the leap from being a stage 1 boutique structure into a stage 2 scalable structure, which is very much like that caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. You can't just make a faster caterpillar. That doesn't work. And so that's what we do. And that's the first framework, is the idea of going from a stage 1 boutique company to a stage 2 scalable business that can grow without killing the CEO because she has to work so hard. So that's
Yeah.
the first construct. And then I've got others I can share with you, but I'll take a breath. I'm talking too much.
Well, that's so important, building systems for scale, right? Because a lot of times, especially I'm sure as a first-time founder, you want to control as much as you can. So you're trying to be part of every decision, everything that touches your company brand. You are the face of
Right.
that brand, right?
You want a sense of control. And
Hmm.
most new entrepreneurs, especially, they feel like they want, the Teddy Roosevelt, the former president many years ago, his daughter used to joke about him. He wanted to be the baby at every baptism, bride at every wedding, and the corpse at every funeral, and business owners think that they need to be in the middle of it, controlling everything with their puppet fingers. But that's exactly the wrong way to look at it once you get past that boutique stage, because it'll kill you. You need to build a systems-based approach with functional leadership team that runs the company, and the CEO leads the leadership team rather than the CEO runs the day-to-day operation. Does that make sense?
Percent. You really have to kind of work yourself out of the job, right? In a way, and let other people handle certain tasks.
Right. Work yourself into a different job, because your job becomes building and nurturing that team and optimizing the systems that run across each department.
That's a very optimizing the systems. I'm always fascinated by that, just because I feel like if you want to scale anything from something as simple as a podcast, I've noticed if you have a
Mhm.
system, you can be so much more efficient with how many podcasts you can roll out versus when you don't. And so the first thing I always do when I do a project is over time, the first 3 times I do my own thing, and then I'm like, okay, I got to
Yeah.
do it this way. So if you think about the system for scaling in terms of your leadership style, what does that look like? What does that framework look like to create that system where you're managing and nurturing your team and you're creating those systems?
Well, it's kind of interesting, and I know you'll get this because you're a technologist, but a company itself is a complex system.
Hmm.
And the definition to me of a complex system is a system that contains subsystems within it. So I like to compare it to an automobile. A typical automobile has, I think, 30,000 parts in today's world, and billions of bytes of data, but 30,000 physical parts, 25, 30,000. And, you've got a transmission, which is a complex system in and of itself. And you've got the engine and you've got the steering system. So that's the way a company is too. And to answer your question, the way we structure it is we take a slice of the playbook from the human body. So a typical person has 602 muscles. Now, what could be more complex than a human being? Probably the most complex thing in the universe. You've got, 602 muscles, and if you lined your blood vessels up in a row, they would stretch for many, many miles, all your capillaries and veins and arteries. If, we've got billions of neurons in our brains, and we've got literally trillions of cells with a T. How could you find anything more complex? So how do we handle that? How does medical science handle that? We categorize things and we simplify without losing too much. And the way we work with the muscles is a human has 602 muscles typically, and we break them into 6 groups: back, your chest, your shoulders, your arms, your legs, and your abs, 6 muscle groups. Well, a company, infinitely complex, right, also has 6 muscle groups. We call them the 6 scalabilities. So to answer your question, that's the first level of our framework, are the 6 scalabilities. The first one is leadership and culture. The second one is what we call the growth engine, and that involves your branding, marketing, lead generation, sales, customer support. The third is the money machine, or the business model and finance. And the fourth is the human capital. And the fifth is technology, your world, and other elements of infrastructure like legal and compliance and plant and equipment, but mostly technology. And the sixth scalability is operations and innovation. And I don't want to bore you or the listeners with too much detail, but that's the first level. And if you dial each one of those things in, there's a second level of 4 benchmark systems, which I can go into as much depth as you want. But those 4 benchmark systems, so that's 24 things to keep track of for a company, which sounds like a lot, but it's better than infinite, right? It's better than a billion things. And this structural scalability framework really helps. It helps 2 things. It helps the CEO understand what she's up against and what she needs to track. Again, 24 things is way easier than infinite. And then it also provides a framework for the leadership team members, one of whom runs each of the 6 scalabilities, or close to that. So it's an organizing way for that leadership team to truly run the company, and the CEO leads the leadership team.
I
Anyway.
really love that. It's like key indicators, right, for your company's health.
Mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm.
does the CEO look at these 24 components on a daily basis, on an hourly basis? Like, what is the cadence around which, or does it depend on the pillar specifically that they're addressing?
Well, within each of those 24 are multiple tools and metrics and subsets. So you're interacting with them every day. But what the cadence of operations, let's say, of a mid-sized company that's in stage 2, that's a scalable, is the CEO will meet once a week, one-on-one, with each of her leadership team members. Maybe it's only 15 or 20 minutes. Maybe it's up to an hour, but it's a structured conversation, and we can go into detail on that if you want. So they meet once a week with the direct reports. Usually you have 5 to sometimes 8 direct reports. And then once a week, you get together with the entire leadership team for 90 minutes in one room or on a Zoom meeting if you're not together and personally. And there's a structured process for driving and having real strategic, meaningful conversation for 90 minutes, the most important team. But in general, each of the leadership team members is running one or a key aspect of the 6 scalabilities. It's a position-based organizational chart in a scalable stage 2 company. And so you're going to have one person, maybe 2 for, you can split up, like you might have a different person running marketing and a different person running sales in within scalability too. But in general, those people are responsible and they're driving those and maintaining those key systems for each of their underlying scalabilities. That, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Do you see
that
what I'm
makes
saying?
perfect sense because they're all responsible for their area.
Right. Monkeys stay in the departments rather than going on the CEO's back like it used to back when it was a boutique and structured as stage one.
Artificial intelligence works amazing at recognizing patterns and systems.
Yes. Yes.
And
Right.
as I thought about your framework, it seems like a perfect analysis to have almost like an agent watching each one of these pillars and reporting on trends or changes in patterns
Hmm.
within the
Hmm.
organization. How have you
Hmm.
thought about implementing potentially AI into that framework? Would that work?
Well, yes. And so, quick caveat, I don't consider myself a AI expert. I use it every day and our clients use it and I love it. I've been tracking AI ever since I read Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity, is near 20 years ago, and have been excited about it and scared of it and waiting for it. And to see it come to life for real in today's world is just astounding to be alive. And I tend to look at AI agents as team members. So, each of the members, each of the six scalabilities is theoretic. Let's pretend it's that simple that it's just six people on the leadership team. And each of the teams underneath each person will have the ability to harness AI and to make that AI agent or those AI agents as team members, as assistants to the human beings. And that's how we look at it. And we look at it in, we've got I put together with a colleague, a friend, a gentleman named Tyler Small. I want to make sure and give him credit. And he's got a group called the 5-Star Approach. But we put together a model with 7 pillars that our clients will look at when they're thinking about AI. The first one is getting clear about how you want to use it, your objectives, and the strategy for approaching it. And then number 2, close after it, is the security and governance, and how do we handle this, and who has permissions, and how do we contain our content, but more important, how do we contain the integrity of our customers' content, protect it. Third is how do we use it for research and content creation? And then fourth is how do we staff it? And fifth is how do we use it? How do we harness it to grow our business? Because it's so powerful for that growth engine, which I could talk about for a long time, but there's a
Now
many
you
places.
got me all excited. The growth engine, how do you use it there? I think compliance and just trust and risk around AI is so critical. And
Right.
a lot of those components are focused on that.
So that maybe the growth engine, we could take a minute. So growth engine is the second scalability, right? So just to be clear, that's an important the idea of how do you build the growth engine is really about customers. Who are they? Why do they buy from us? What are they hiring us to do? What are they afraid of? What are they excited about? What are their aspirations? What are their fears? So the growth engine has 4 levels, just like all the other scalabilities. And level 1 is what we call the brand foundation. And that's really answering those fundamental questions that I just mentioned. Who are our best customers? Why do they buy from us? What are they hiring us to do, etc.? And people will come to us and say, build me a website. And I'll say, how on earth can we build you a website when you don't even know who you're selling to? You don't have clarity around that brand foundation. So that's the first level. And then once we get that nailed, and you can imagine using AI to help define or to analyze the market, to look at competitors, to help you crystallize your key value proposition, and looking at the products and services that you could be selling to those clients. So that's number 1, the brand foundation. And then once you have that fairly clear, you're ready to create the brand assets. That's level 2, like your logo, the name of your company, but the colors that you use, the layouts, but also your website and your marketing materials and your champion kits and all those things. how can you build those brand assets if you don't even know who your customers are? So you do the brand foundation first, then you create the assets. Then the third level is lead generation and community development. So that's where we start to do outreach. So we start to create content where, we start to build that community. And then the fourth level is sales conversion and customer service. How do we actually get people to buy and appreciate the value? And how do we get them to continue and upgrade and refer us to their friends and be part of our community ongoing? I don't know if that makes sense, Vicky, but and you can see AI playing a role in every one of those areas, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the one that I'm actually most interested in selfishly is around the sales and how do you keep the customer, you know, growing and evolving with your company? Because I think that you can automate more or less many of the other ones. But once you get to that stack where they're your customer, how do they say that most sales are made to existing customers, not to new customers. So how do you keep that engine growing through referrals, for example?
Well, that's why the customer service is grouped in with the sales conversion, because that's the ongoing relationship. That's where the referrals come. That's where the upsells come. And that's where, you really have to be clear with, let's pretend for a moment that we have a company with us with salespeople, with the human beings. They have to be very clear about the value proposition and why would somebody want to buy this, and how do the numbers stack up? There's so many questions, but the fundamentals, AI helping us with that is, there's just a whole universe of things helping customers. One of our clients is a distributor of industrial parts. They've got thousands and thousands of parts and very complicated and a lot of specs. And so for a salesperson to be able to navigate that by herself or himself is very difficult. So, but there's all sorts of AI assistants that will integrate with their ERP system, the financial systems that they're using, and also interact with their inventory levels and optimize so there's product related details, there's competitive details, there are putting together a sales playbook so that all of the sales reps are saying the same things, or at least understanding the same fundamental concepts, and really deeply understanding the value that the company and the products and services are delivering to the customers. So there's just so much richness there. And then there are also AI tools that can help you generate leads or understand where you can find customers. And then there are all sorts of ways to record and transcribe the conversations that, with permission, with the customers, and really understand what they're actually saying and help interpret that. And then I'm excited to have engines that can help our clients build out referral networks and help keep track of those things. I could go on and on, but does that kind of touch on what you were talking about?
Yeah, there's so many applications of what you do, right? Because it's really a framework and you could run the tools in very many different directions. Do you feel like
That's right.
the tools, I mean, when I think about AI, for example, we talk a lot about the front office, the sales, the flashy content that you could quickly create, the images. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people is really where the benefit is on those back office system integrations. How do you actually implement AI into your ERP? How do you integrate it with your supply chain, right? How do you quickly then provide that information to your sales team in a way that's consistent? But it's that loop. I think a lot of times we think about it, a tool,
Right.
but not
Yeah.
specifically a process that could actually optimize.
Well, we're at the frontier of that. And I'm not going to pretend to have a lot of answers and perfect clarity, but we have to push. Each of the big ERP companies are building AI into their tools. And, I've been waiting for years for this, but you should be able to go in and say, who are our best customers? What are the transactions that are providing the best margin? You shouldn't have to hard code these things. You should be able to go in and we're starting to be able to do that. One of our clients is a wonderful manufacturing company. They build big industrial equipment, complicated equipment. They have their upgrading their ERPs. They're transitioning to a new ERP system, and they're also building in and integrating a system that does production scheduling, where they've got these great big huge laser cutting machines and stamps and presses, manufacturing equipment. And they're starting to integrate those and go down to the machine level and then organize their scheduling of manufacturing parts and components in a completely different way than they used to do that. And they're using AI to help them make that happen. And this is just scratching the surface. They have a lot of robotics too, old school robotics, but boy, just wait for in the next 5 years, the tsunami wave of robotics, AI enabled robotics is just
Tell
going to
me
be
about that.
transformed.
Tell me what you see coming in terms of robotics.
Well, now you're going to make me embarrass myself because
No,
I'm not an
no, I'm just
expert,
fascinated
but
with
I
it.
think there are industrial applications, specialized robots, which have been in place for, gee, 40 years in some cases, but they're getting better. They're getting smarter. We're able to really understand uptime, downtime, maintenance, scheduling, keeping these things alive. They're on the sheets of steel that this company, for example, is using. They're able to reduce scrap by having AI help organize the different parts that they cut into the sheet. So there's much less scrap than there used to be, and they're able to flow the manufacturing into the process, so they can get work orders out faster and more clean. They're starting to implement a thing called the unified naming space, which is a way to simplify your database access by having part names and whatnot, and having the systems tap into that instead of having to keep the names in each of your separate systems. There's all sorts of things like that that are happening to make things simpler and to hopefully bring more manufacturing back to the United States, and to help balance and optimize supply chain beyond just the manufacturing. I don't know if that addresses the
No,
question you
it's
just
perfect. Actually, I advise a lot of manufacturing companies as well, and
asked.
larger ones, and I see it as like green space right now. I'm excited.
Yeah,
I used to
yeah,
be in the like retail industry tech, but I feel like that's so saturated with Amazon effect. They're just margins are very skimp on the retail. But manufacturing has like a huge opportunity to transform itself right now with robotics, getting into the new technology instead of having the older tech stack, and really driving a lot of scalability. Talk about scale. I think we're going to see a lot more scalability coming from.
right. And we haven't even opened up the,
Yeah.
3D printing and other, things that will happen. The other dimension of this that's got me intrigued is the consumer side of robotics, and how that I predict will penetrate. I mean, that's probably a statement of the obvious. There's so much hype around robotics, but it's actually also coming to life, and I'm astounded by the videos that I see. And it's not just about humanoid robots walking around folding clothes, but even that. I have a one of the CEOs of one of our clients, an international data company back east. He just bought a new car, and he lives in New Jersey, and his family has a cottage 52 miles away out on the Jersey shore, and he bought a new car before the new year, and he put his kids in the car, and he typed in the address, and the car drove itself. He didn't touch the steering wheel or any of the pedals, and he just drives around now. Doesn't. And I've been riding Waymos for the last 4 years in San Francisco. Both of our boys, dozens and dozens. I love Waymo. I love self-driving cars, but to have that be a car you can own, and to just extrapolate on that over the next 3, 5, 8 years, what kind of a difference that's going to make in the world. Every one of the companies we work with and you work with, Vicky, are going to be transformed by this. It's just astounding.
I'm just excited
You
about
tell me
all the,
now.
huh?
You're the one that you're the expert.
I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a lot of investment going into the space. And the biggest thing that's going to be really is how do we treat these new robots that appear? How do we account for them? How do we build trust with them? I think we're going to just have an interesting task as a humanity to figure out, do we trust a machine to drive us around without holding the wheel? Do we trust a housekeeper in our house, right? That's taking care of our home, part of our family, listening to our conversations, that's a robot. So I think we just have to think about it in a grander scheme as to how humans start to interact with machines, because we've always interacted with them with kind of like authority, for lack of a better. We were the authority over the machine in many ways, and now machine potentially could become an equal or an authority over us. And I think that's a very big dynamic change.
You're right. And it's very frightening. Like I said, I've been thinking about and worried about that for 20 years. There's also an argument for abundance. And to take it up a level of abstraction, our world today, the birth rates in so many countries are below replacement rate, below the 2.1. I think the US is 1.8. Italy and Japan are even, much lower. And essentially the growth of the human population is flattening out. And I think a couple hundred years from now, as crazy as it might sound to think that long term, we're going to be in a place where we have maybe a few billion fewer people on the earth than we do today, which ever since Adam Smith in the 1700s, we have been trained that you grow or die, and that economies need to grow and populations need to grow. And people worry, how are the old people in Japan, the young generation going to be taking, that's where this automation, the robotics, the world, the technology is there, the abundance is there, and we can have a nice soft landing in an ideal world. Of course, we could also unleash viruses and bombs and all sorts of bad things, or, Dave and 2001 Space Odyssey, controlling our lives. Of course, Hal 2000. But anyway, there's all sorts of bad scenarios, but there's also a really nice through line if we can navigate,
I'm
and
excited. I think the speed of change is greater than at any other time that we've experienced as a humanity, it feels like. It's like being a part of an amazing show, and you don't know what's coming next, you know?
I mentioned my grandfather at the beginning of our conversation, and I remember being a teenager. So this would have been the mid 70s. And I went through a little period of depression because I thought of my grandfather. He was born in 1899. I thought, he got to essentially see the birth of the automobile and the airplane, which was invented in 1903, and the radio and the television and computers. And I thought of all these things that he got to see. And I got real sad because I thought everything had been invented. There was nothing. And then to be alive today when the second derivative it's just unbelievable, the change that he could never have even imagined. We're very lucky
We are
to be
very
alive.
lucky. We are very lucky. And to tie it back to business, do you see small businesses becoming greater in size, or in terms of how many people approach entrepreneurship because now they have access to resources in terms of robotics, in terms of AI that they've never had before, where they could scale their organizations faster?
Oh yeah. When I think of the number of billionaires that have been created in the last 5 years, and when I think about, the old metrics that we used to use, $100,000 of revenue per employee, now people are talking about $1 billion company with one employee. I don't know if anyone's hit that yet, but yes, the barriers have come way down, and with AI, even, dramatically further. So it's going to be easier it already is, to start companies, to communicate with clients, but it also is more complicated and there's more competition. And then, of course, AI itself is competing for a lot of the jobs and pulling a lot of the value out of the equation. So arguably, I think we're going to be in a world over the next few years where we have to redefine our worth as human beings. Our identities are so much, especially in the United States, based on what we do for a living. And I think people are going to have to adapt. And, I think it's to me obvious that there will be some sort of national income. And, the AI will integrate with us, and we have the resources, we have the abundance. We're going to have nearly unlimited energy in the fairly short to midterm. And there are so many things that this world will have, even that we don't have today. And so it's gonna we're gonna have to redefine who we are to some degree. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So how do we prepare? I mean, that's the number one question everyone asks. Like, what should I be doing to prepare my children for this new world, to prepare myself? What actions can people take?
Well, I don't know what we can do to protect ourselves from some general AI that, you know, governs us somehow. I don't know. We're all just small individual people, but I think that the thing to do is really embrace it and start, if you're not already. I know you are. You work with it, have it be a colleague, and have it. I used to use AI as more of a search engine on steroids, but once you start to change your perspective and work with it and treat it as a colleague, or treat it as a part of your team, and just really embrace it and not be afraid of it. I think that's what we can do. And I think we have to stay. I'll say one more thing. I'd love to get your opinion on this. I think there's just going to be a glut of crappy AI created content, and already I'm getting sick of it, and I already can recognize it, and I don't really use it to help me write words. I definitely use it to help me research and help, and I ask it questions. But I think that over time, the one of the things that we can do is be even more authentic and even more human, and take care of our customers with even more sincere care, and build those systems that we were talking about before, and optimize them using AI, but keeping that tie with our human capital and with our customers, and keeping that alive. That's one thing we can do, and that extends to our families, and really keeping clear about our values and who we are and who we want them to be. Does that make sense, Vicky? I don't
It's
know.
not going to go out of style, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, yeah, being human is more important than ever.
It is so important. And just, it's those relationships, right, that you form, the communities around you, your
Yeah,
family. Absolutely. This was so inspiring, Brad. I appreciate it. I know we covered so much, and I have like 10 questions right now in my head that I'll have to write down and send them to you. But, we'll definitely have a follow-up conversation. How would our audience reach out to you? Do you want them to reach out on LinkedIn? How do they buy your book that's coming out hopefully here soon, or your previous one?
thank you. Oh, that's kind of you. Well, first of all, the book that I wrote and published in 2020 is about family business. It's called Family Business Abundance. Family Business Abundance. And you can find it on Amazon.com. That's the easiest way, Kindle or printed. And then myself, my firm is called the Scalable Leadership Group. Scalable Leadership Group, and our URL is scalableleadership.com. So feel free to visit us there. My email address is Brad, at scalableleadership.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody that's interested in any of the things we discussed today.
Yeah, if you want your business to scale, you have to reach out to Brad, because I can tell you have the systems and the process and the people to help. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Vicki.
Brad.
It's
I
been such
appreciate
a
your time.
pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, I did too. Thank you so much.